till the meeting between Trump and Zelensky. Drone debris fell on the streets of Moscow, and the recognition of the Palestinian state, protests and clashes have already erupted in some countries because of this. All this and more. In today's edition of TSN, stay with us on air much longer than usual, as we are expecting crucial negotiations and statements from the United States. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, watch and leave your comments. And for now, here are a few more important topics in this edition. The president is already in the States. A Ukrainian address is expected at the opening of the UN General Assembly. Who will Volodymyr Zelensky meet with, and what will the conversation with Donald Trump be like? Less than half an hour remains until the meeting between President Zelensky and Trump. It is set to take place on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly. Today, its anniversary 80th session has begun. So more than have arrived in New York, 140 heads of state. Zelensky arrived the day before and has already held a number of meetings, including with the president of Kazakhstan, Kassym-Jomart Tokayev, the managing director of the International Monetary Fund, Kristalina Georgieva, and Patriarch Bartholomew. Volodymyr Zelensky also met with Keith Kellogg, the special representative of President Trump on Ukraine, and informed him about the situation at the front and the results of counteroffensive actions near Dobropilya and Pokrovsk. They discussed cooperation in the defense sector, in particular the production of drones and the procurement of American weapons, which Ukraine has proposed to the United States. Overall, President Zelensky has nearly 20 meetings planned, and he will be speaking at the General Assembly tomorrow. Today, among those who spoke from the main UN podium was Donald Trump. And let me remind you, a meeting between the presidents of Ukraine and the United States is scheduled for 8 p.m. Kiev time. And we will be getting all the most important news from New York from TSN's correspondent in the USA, Olha Koshelenko. She is live from the UN building. She is with us right now, Olya. Hello. So, according to the preliminary plan, will the talks between Trump and Zelensky start on time? And Trump has already spoken at the General Assembly today. What are the main points of his speech?
Hello, colleague. Instead of the 15-minute limit set by the UN General Assembly protocol, Donald Trump spoke from the podium for an hour. So the schedules of all the other leaders who were present in the hall during his speech have now shifted, and it's hard to predict whether, for example, the Trump-Zelensky meeting will start on time. The speech of US President Donald Trump often sounded, I would say, like a cold shower, both for the UN as an organization and for the member countries. It all started with Trump's teleprompter not working, from which he was supposed to read his speech. And the US president said that all the UN gives him is a broken teleprompter and obstacles when it comes to resolving international conflicts. He claimed that he had already stopped 7 wars, while the UN did nothing, not even a single phone call, as he put it, to help. Trump also expressed dissatisfaction with the countries that unilaterally recognize the state of Palestine, calling it a reward for Hamas. Let me remind you that both the UN Secretary General himself and a number of leading world powers have recently taken this step and recognized the state of Palestine. As for the Russian war, the main messages from the US president regarding Ukraine were as follows. Russia hoped to win the war in 3 days, but has been fighting for 3.5 years, which does not do it any credit. The US is ready to impose tariffs on buyers of Russian oil, but only if European countries do the same.
Everyone thought that Russia would win this war in 3 days, but things did not turn out as expected. It was supposed to be a quick clash, and this does not reflect well on Russia. It looks bad. It doesn't matter what was happening there, but it was supposed to last no more than a week. And now they've been fighting for 3.5 years, killing 5,000 to 7,000 young soldiers every week, mostly military personnel on both sides. And partly in the cities, in much smaller numbers where missiles and drones strike. China and India are the main sponsors of this war because they continue to buy Russian oil. There are no excuses for the fact that even NATO countries have not completely given up Russian energy and Russian energy resources, which I found out 2 weeks ago and was upset about. Just think about it. They are financing a war against themselves. Who has ever heard of such a thing? If Russia is not ready to make a deal to end the war, the United States is fully prepared to impose new, very powerful tariffs, which will stop the bloodshed very quickly. But for these tariffs to be effective, European nations, you who are gathered here now, must join us and also implement corresponding measures.
And the meeting of the coalition for the return of Ukrainian children has just concluded. Literally just now, the Ukrainian delegation walked by here in the corridor. Volodymyr Zelensky and Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, together with their wives, presided over this meeting. This coalition has brought together 40 countries from around the world, united by the idea of helping to return Ukrainian children abducted by Russia to their homes. As the president of Ukraine said at the opening, thousands of our children have been abducted since the start of the full-scale invasion. Lists have been handed over to the Russians, but Russia is doing almost nothing to bring them back. Only 1,625 children, according to Zelensky, have returned home. So the pressure needs to be increased. And it is symbolic, as the president of Ukraine noted, that the International Criminal Court has opened a case against Putin and his accomplices precisely for this, for the abduction of Ukrainian children.
During negotiations in Turkey, we gave the Russians a list of 300 Ukrainian children. This is only a small part of those whom Russia has abducted. And Russia has done nothing, not even provided any information. It gives this information neither to us nor to international organizations. I urge you to join the effort so that we can return and reintegrate these children. And put pressure on Russia to make it happen. And the UN must once again emphasize that this crime must be stopped. The children must return home.
So right now we are waiting for the meeting to begin. Trump and Zelensky, let me remind you, at the start of this event, only statements from both presidents are scheduled. However, as is his custom, the US president may allow journalists in to ask questions, as he usually does. It's been just over a month since the previous meeting between Trump and Zelensky, let me remind you, and the topics for discussion remain the same. The President of the United States only threatens to impose sanctions against Russia, as he did today, for example, from the UN General Assembly podium, but only if Europe does the same. There is also the promised meeting between Zelensky and Putin by Trump, which still hasn't happened, according to the US President, because of the hatred between the two sides. Then the key issue is security guarantees. The EU and Ukraine have developed their own draft, and after the US President's visit to one of the key European allies, the United Kingdom, there is now an opportunity to discuss this with the Ukrainian leader. And also today, according to the agenda, a special meeting of the Security Council dedicated to Ukraine is expected. And in the evening, President Zelensky and his wife are scheduled to attend a reception hosted by the US President and the First Lady of the United States on the occasion of the opening of the UN General Assembly. And since, as is well known, Melania Trump is deeply concerned about the issue of returning Ukrainian children, a matter President Trump has repeatedly spoken about, and she even delivered a letter to Putin regarding this, it is also expected that today, on the sidelines of the General Assembly, the First Ladies of Ukraine and the United States will meet for the first time. A celebration.
Thank you for being with us today. Our special correspondent in the U.S., Olha Koshelenko, reported on how the UN General Assembly began and what messages have already been voiced there. Olha, we're not saying goodbye yet. First of all, we're waiting for you to join us again when the talks between Trump and Zelensky begin. If possible, maybe we'll get to see the start, or at least those first statements that will be open to the media. So see you soon. We will definitely return to this topic. Our broadcast will be more extensive than usual. At this time, we are waiting for the meeting of the presidents and their statements following these talks. Meanwhile, Russian terror in Zaporizhzhia does not stop. During the day, the Russians attacked the city with Shaheds. It is already known that a 45-year-old man has died. There are currently 12 wounded. One person is in serious condition. The occupiers targeted warehouse facilities, cars were burning, and at night the city shook from explosions. High-explosive aerial bombs. At least 5 of them fell. One hit a private house. The 49-year-old owner hid in the basement, but it did not save him. The munition pierced the concrete shelter, and the man's body was found under the rubble. The blast wave damaged neighboring houses, and enemy bombs also fell on the territory of an enterprise. Russian shelling claimed the lives of 3 residents of Donetsk region. Another 13 people were injured, and 2 civilians were killed by the occupiers in Belozersk. There is 1 fatality and 3 people hospitalized in Kostiantynivka. Medical assistance was also needed for victims in Dmitrivka, Drushkivka, Serhivka, and Rayhorodok. 1 person was killed and 3 were injured in Odessa region. The Russians attacked the region with ballistic missiles. In Tatarbunary, several resorts, shopping pavilions, and a hotel were destroyed. And in Odessa, windows were shattered in 9 residential buildings and in an educational institution. A resident of the Derhachi community, which is in the Kharkiv region, was taken to the hospital after shelling from multiple rocket launches in Kupiansk. Meanwhile, a woman was killed. In the Kherson region, the Russians attacked a resident of Bilozerka with a drone while she was in her yard. The wounded were hospitalized with blast injuries in Nikopol. In the Dnipropetrovsk region, an FPV drone struck a private house during the day. One woman was killed, another was wounded. And in the Nikopol district, a 19-year-old young man was injured. He has already been taken to Dnipro and operated on there. His jawbones were shattered. He cannot speak, but the surgeons will make it possible. And this happens every day, especially there. Where? Where the shelling is constant. She fought for her life for 2 weeks, but a miracle did not happen. Tetyana Sakiyan, who had to undergo an emergency delivery after a Shahed drone struck her home, died in the hospital. Tetyana's relatives told TSN about this. It all happened on September 8th when a Russian drone hit an apartment building in the Svetoshensky district. Tetyana and her husband Vadim suffered burns on 80% of their bodies, but doctors were able to save the child. They performed an emergency C-section, and a boy named Nazar was born, the name his mother had always dreamed of giving him. At the moment of the explosion, Tetyana's sister Alina was in the apartment with the family. They had grown up as orphans since birth. Alina was lucky to survive and didn't get a single scratch because she was in another room. The family believed that Tetyana would make it, but during the night her heart stopped beating. Nazar's father is still fighting for his life. Close relatives are planning to take the boy in and raise him. He directed Russian attacks on airfields and energy facilities in western Ukraine. The FSB agent was detained by the Security Services Counterintelligence in Khmelnytskyi. Enemy intelligence services recruited the 31-year-old unemployed man through Telegram channels, which Devon was searching. For quick money, the traitor sent his handlers the geolocations of Ukrainian armed forces units and the coordinates of electrical substations that the Russians planned to target with missile and drone strikes. He also passed on information about municipal institutions and police units. He was detained while filming an electrical substation. The agent is currently in custody. He faces life imprisonment with confiscation of property. The occupiers have brought Berdiansk to the brink of an environmental disaster. The Berdiansk reservoir there is relentlessly drying up. Locals filmed video of the dried-up reservoir the day before. Even the occupiers themselves acknowledged the problem. Let us recall that after the destruction of the Kakhovka hydroelectric power plant, residents of Berdiansk stopped receiving Dnipro water. The invaders switched the city to water from the Berdiansk reservoir. However, the reservoir's reserves are insufficient to supply the entire city, so residents of the occupied city face constant prolonged water outages and water quality that does not meet any sanitary standards. Nearly 60 combat clashes took place in the Pokrovsk direction, along with attempts by the occupiers to advance in the areas of the settlements of Olhivka, Novohorivka, Rekivka, Seredny, Kolodyazy, and others. This is in the Lyman sector. In total, 179 battles took place along the entire front line over the past day. Pokrovsk remains the most active sector. These are the latest updated figures from the General Staff. The Russians are striking both Ukrainian unit positions and populated areas. In particular, they launched 3 missile strikes and 67 airstrikes. However, the Ukrainian armed forces are also putting up a strong resistance to the occupiers. Over the past day, 1,010 Russian soldiers were neutralized. The armed forces of Ukraine also destroyed 5 tanks, 53 artillery systems, 2 multiple rocket launchers, 2 aircraft, a helicopter, and 123 enemy vehicles. Explosions rang out one after another, and the debris from downed drones rained down right onto the streets of Moscow. On the previous evening, the territory of Ukraine was attacked by the aggressor's drones. In addition to the capital, drones also entered a number of other Russian regions. As a result, a series of explosions was heard, airports were closed, and drones were detected in Ryazan, Saratov, Engels, and Kazan. Because of this, air defense systems were actively engaged and the covert plan was announced. The airports Sheremetyevo, Vnukovo, and Samara temporarily suspended operations. Local authorities reported the alleged downing of nearly 30 drones in Moscow and its surroundings. Meanwhile, a video is circulating in propaganda channels showing the moment a drone crashed in Roitov, which is in the Moscow region. As a result of the loud explosion, cars were damaged there. Meanwhile, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine has revealed details about the strikes on several other important enemy targets. This concerns the Bryansk and Samara regions. There, the targets of the raids were Russian oil refining facilities, so this will weaken the supply of fuel to enemy troops and limit Russia's export capabilities. It has also been confirmed that 2 aircraft were hit at the Kacha military airfield in temporarily occupied Crimea. Unite efforts to bring Ukrainian children home. Around 40 delegations joined the meeting of the Coalition for the Return of Ukrainian Children. Volodymyr Zelensky and Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney chaired this meeting. Together with their mothers, as the President of Ukraine emphasized, thousands of our children have been abducted since the beginning of the war. And Russia first deprived them of their homes, deported them, and now is trying to take away everything from them, from their memories to their national identity. The president pointed out symbolically that the criminal case against Putin and his accomplices was opened by the International Criminal Court specifically for crimes against children. However, despite international pressure, only 1,625 children have been returned to Ukraine, so Volodymyr Zelensky called on the world to unite its efforts.
During negotiations in Turkey, we gave the Russians a list of 300 Ukrainian children. This is only a small part of those whom Russia has abducted, and Russia has done nothing, not even provided any information. It gives this information neither to us nor to international organizations. I urge you to join the efforts so that we can return and reintegrate these children and put pressure on Russia to make it happen. And the UN must once again emphasize this. The crime must be stopped. The children must return home.
So the meeting of the Coalition for the Return of Ukrainian Children abducted by Russia is still ongoing. It began under the chairmanship of Volodymyr Zelensky and Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, with both Volodymyr Zelensky and their wives presiding together. It is now 8 p.m. It was at this time that the meeting between Presidents Zelensky and Trump was supposed to begin. But as we mentioned at the start of the broadcast, it might be delayed because the American leader, instead of the allotted 15 minutes, spoke from the podium at the General Assembly for an hour today. As a result, the schedules of all the other leaders who were present in the hall during his speech were shifted accordingly. And it's hard to say whether the meeting between Trump and Zelensky will start on time. The speech of the U.S. president began with Trump's teleprompter not working, from which he was supposed to read his address. He said that all the UN gives him is supposedly a broken teleprompter and obstacles when it comes to resolving international conflicts. He claimed that he has already stopped 7 wars while the UN has not. Nothing, not a single phone call to help. Trump also expressed dissatisfaction with the countries that unilaterally recognize the state of Palestine, calling it a reward for Hamas. Let me remind you that both the UN Secretary General himself and a number of leading world powers have done this in recent days. As for Russia's war against Ukraine, the main messages were as follows. Russia hoped to win the war in 3 days, but has been fighting for 3.5 years, which does not do it any credit. The US is ready to impose tariffs on buyers of Russian oil, but only if European countries do the same. So let me remind you that at 8 p.m. we were expecting a meeting between the American and Ukrainian presidents. We continue to wait. TSN correspondent Olha Koshelenko is working on the sidelines of the General Assembly. As soon as we do, we'll get a signal from her. For now, here's a live signal. These are the UN corridors. That's where things stand for now. As you can see, it's empty. Perhaps this is where the presidents will speak to the press before or after their meeting. We hope to see all of this live in this edition of TSN, so stay with us. We have information that the president of Ukraine, at least Volodymyr Zelensky, has already set out for his meeting with Donald Trump. So obviously it will begin soon. The scandalous dry cargo ship. The ship from China visited 3 times the port in Russian-occupied Sevastopol. This was reported by the Financial Times, citing comments from the office of the president of Ukraine. Although Beijing has not joined the Western sanctions against Russia, which prohibit international ships from entering Sevastopol, Chinese merchant vessels have still tried to avoid ports in territories occupied by Russia. Ukrainian officials believe that the occupying country may have used this vessel to transport goods from the occupied parts of Donetsk and Kherson regions. After visiting Sevastopol, the vessel then called at ports in Turkey and Alexandria, Egypt. Its route was tracked thanks to satellite images, which did not match the vessel's official itinerary. Ukraine has already stated that such actions are unacceptable, and our embassy in China has raised this issue with the local Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Beijing responded that they would consider the case separately and, if necessary, take, quote, appropriate measures.